Story 1. We should really tone down Christmas gift giving between adults. I think a lot of people would enjoy the holidays more if they didn't stress about finding the perfect, life-changing gift for everyone in their life, and we just stuck to simple things like treats and trinkets. Story 2. As a teacher, parents are the absolute worst, with school division and state or provincial policymakers coming in a close second. Without parents lobbying for lowering academic and behavior standards, and without out-of-touch bureaucrats making decisions about how teachers do their jobs, it would be a much better job than it is currently. Story 3. A double cheeseburger should have 2 slices of cheese. If it only has 1 slice, it should be called a double with cheese. No one seems to agree with me and thinks that I am being petty. Story 4. Barring medical conditions, if your child is obese, you are a bad parent. No, I am not a food police type mom. My kids can enjoy whatever they want to an extent, but sodas at every meal or a whole bag of chips in one sitting is a no. We still keep sweets around, but they are learning moderation and self-control through our actions and reminders. Story 5. Not everyone should be allowed to have children, and not everyone should be allowed to raise children. Some people have health issues that should not be passed on to kids. My brother-in-law has Crohn's disease, his dad had it, and all 3 of his kids have it. Even my mother-in-law has advised the grandkids not to have children. Some people should not be raising kids either. Some are not mentally or emotionally capable of handling the responsibilities of raising children. I made my own doctor's appointments starting in middle school. I never got the braces I needed, even though my dad was willing to pay for them, because my mom didn't want to do the work. My mom was simply not capable of caring about another person. I was just an accessory to get her attention, and when I wasn't cute anymore, I was on my own. My sister-in-law directly said in front of her son that she didn't want him. She only had him to keep his father around. I've heard a person say they should have another child so that the Department of Housing and Urban Development would give them a bigger house. I knew a woman who beat her kids so badly, she broke bones. Child Protective Services took her kids away multiple times but gave them back after she passed the parenting class they forced her to take. I've encountered multiple people who have neglected their children for drugs, alcohol, or a boyfriend. There are just some people who should not have children. Story 6. That you don't have to have everything in your life be so linear in progression. Run your own race. Social media has really distorted people's minds in this regard. Story 7. I really don't give a damn what people do with their own bodies, up to and including selling their organs, although I would advise them not to. Story 8. Electrons should absolutely be positive. I am okay with us switching positive and negative on everything to accomplish this. Positive and negative notation is completely arbitrary, so I'm not asking to change the laws of physics. I'm asking to change how we name negative charge. It makes a lot more sense this way, and I have a very long rant about it. Story 9. If a pet is very old but healthy, they should not be put down, in my opinion. I understand the need to euthanize a pet when they are sick and in pain, but there are so many that simply put down these animals just because they have crossed an age the owners consider as too old. It is honestly cruel. If it is healthy, let the dog live as long as it can. Story 10. It's important to find a true partner. It's better to have none than to settle for less. Find someone who understands you and cares for you. Only then will you truly enter your comfort zone. Story 11. Umbrellas are troublesome and more effort than they are worth. If there is any horizontal angle to the rain, you're still getting a bit wet. If it is a light drizzle, it is not worth handling one for how little you will get wet. If it is torrential, your umbrella will break. I hate trying to deal with a soaking wet umbrella and finding a place for it once I am inside. I would rather get drenched in most cases than deal with a frustrating umbrella. Story 12. The punishment for littering should be much more severe, and businesses with cost-cutting measures that willfully pollute the environment should be closed down or fined significantly. Story 13. We are worthless. No matter how successful you are, how rich, how famous, you're just food for bacteria. And in 100 years, nobody will remember you as if you never existed. It hit me when visiting the Medinet Habu temple in Luxor half a lifetime ago. The place is well preserved. You can also visit the ruins of the small palace where the pharaoh would stay while touring the temples, including the throne room, also known as the reception room. You look at the frescoes, you see the king offering rewards to officials, you think about the harem conspiracy, his murder, the executions, all these plots and conspiracies. For what? To have a bunch of tourists walk in your private chambers and enter rooms that were forbidden for the commoners? Story 14. Compared to the current Republican presidential nominee, Richard M. Nixon was a sane, intelligent, dedicated public servant. Now, I'm old enough to remember watching Tricky Dick resign his presidency on live television. My dad, who was a dedicated Republican, absolutely hated Nixon. It was the biggest political scandal in American history, and the only time a United States president resigned in shame. But he did resign, and he was on the edge of tears in that speech. Why? Because he'd served the country his entire life. He started out in the military. Nixon was a veteran, then went into public office and stayed in public service until the end. He was emotional because his entire career was crashing down and he was never going to be able to serve again. Now, was he a crook? Absolutely. He was a slimy, sleazy, racist person that did unspeakable things as president and tried to hang on to power through nefarious means that honestly seem quaint by today's standards. But I think that on some level he did all those horrible things because he thought that was the best way to serve America. He was an ends justify the means guy, but on some level he meant well. Trump doesn't care about his country. He has never served anyone or anything but himself. Nixon, compared to Trump, is a patriot. Story 15. Dogs are not people, and their owners need to stop treating them as if they are. Your dog does not want to go to the grocery store, the mall, or a crowded brunch restaurant with you. Story 16. Most good people are only good as long as it's convenient for them and will bend or go against their morals and ethics when they become too inconvenient. They often try to excuse their actions with vague nonsense about nuance or common sense. Additionally, common sense, as it's come to be used, is a destructive concept that hinders people's ability to grow by making them afraid to ask questions for fear of the condescending answer of, "That's common sense." It reduces empathy for people's struggles because what they're struggling with is deemed common sense. And it is often used as a crutch to avoid teaching by assuming people automatically know something because it's common sense. We would be better off if we got rid of the concept of common sense and started defaulting to explaining things regardless of whether we feel it's something someone should already know. Story 17. If you homeschool your kids, you are an objectively selfish, cruel, conceited, arrogant person who maybe should not have even had kids. I do not think homeschoolers are just in the wrong. I think they are bad people. Story 18. Two immediately came to mind. The first is that I think we think about economics all wrong. Neither gross domestic product nor employment rate give much meaningful information. Gross domestic product only measures how much the price of sales of goods and services amount to, but it doesn't tell you who or what is doing transactions. It is entirely possible for a society to exist where some hyper-rich people are exchanging money back and forth on overpriced luxury while half the population can't afford to save up, and it would appear that country has a high gross domestic product. Conversely, if production meets all demands, measuring how many people are looking for a job but can't find one, unemployment rate, doesn't mean much. The purpose of society shouldn't be to employ as many people as possible into pointless labor, but rather to meet the needs of the population. If people can't find jobs but they have access to all the goods and services they need, why does it matter if they can't find work? At that point, distributing wealth such that all needs are met becomes more important than busy work for its own sake. The second is hyperspecific. Progressive metal fans will almost certainly all be familiar with the band Opeth. The fan-favorite Opeth album is Blackwater Park, but I think it's actually one of their least interesting albums. It marked a direction shift into a much cleaner, less raw style, but I think the folk elements were more interesting on all of their previous work, and I think they had stronger songwriting on all of the other albums from the era Blackwater Park comes from. Deliverance feels riffier and meaner, Ghost Reveries feels much more atmospheric with more robust songwriting, and Watershed has Heir Apparent and Hessian Peel which, for my money, both blow anything on Blackwater Park out of the water. I think Blackwater Park is a good album, but I really can't wrap my head around it being the fan favorite. Story 19. I support the death penalty and also don't think any prison sentence should be more than 20 years. Slightly negotiable, but maintaining this general idea. It just makes no sense to jail someone for more of their life or the rest of their life. If you never want the person to return to society, then execute them. If you believe you are rehabilitating them, then surely there's some serious diminishing returns. Hell, if someone says a maximum of 10 years, I'll listen. Long prison terms don't make sense. Consider the amount of violence that takes place in a prison because of life sentences. Also, when an innocent person is wrongly convicted, is putting them in jail till they die really a lesser violation? Story 20. If you are going to force people into the office, you should really relax on the dress code. Most of us barely want to leave home and deal with all the insanity, so maybe wearing some jeans or shorts would not actually cause a business to implode. Story 21. The Second Amendment is a lot of nonsense that gun lovers cling to like it is holy writ. If James Madison had told us how we should manage roads and traffic when the roads were dirt and horses and wagons accounted for most of the road travel, would anyone honor his thoughts as much as those things have changed? From flintlocks to modern guns, is that any different? No. Story 22. The National Football League and college football are way overhyped. Half of the telecast is commercials, highlights, replays, players celebrating, announcers praising and analyzing. The actual game seems secondary to the hoopla. Story 23. I honestly think naps are overrated. They always make me feel worse when I wake up instead of refreshed. I'd rather just power through the day and sleep at night. Story 24. Weirdly, this ends up being unpopular when I mention it. Anyone found to be abusing disabled parking spaces should have their vehicles taken off them. In all but a few specific reasons, if it is priced above a certain amount, then the local council gets to sell it on and use the money for their budgets. If it is priced below a certain amount, then the vehicle is crushed and left on the driveway of the previous owner with a bill for the cost of crushing. Story 25. I genuinely believe we are effectively alone in the universe. I think we are a product of a complete fluke of sexual selection, and I don't think sapient life is at all inevitable on a planet full of rich biodiversity. The dinosaurs lasted long enough without it, and there was no reason to suspect they ever would have evolved it. But even a fluke may happen multiple times if the numbers are big enough, so I won't go so far as to say there are no intelligent aliens anywhere in the universe, but I think creatures with intelligence on par or above humans are so rare that we will never meet them. For me, the Fermi paradox has a simple solution. There simply isn't anyone out there. Story 26. Death penalty for policing agencies only. It would be reserved for the worst crimes they commit. If you're using your power to commit the worst crimes, I'm sorry, but you're not a good person at all. If anything, your life is worse than worthless since you are actively harming someone else. Plus, death is a pretty good deterrent. Story 27. Fat shaming is not a good thing. Being overweight is not healthy, and being straightforward and honest is sometimes the best approach. I stopped being sympathetic toward obese people when I realized that half the world is starving. Story 28. Proposals are silly. Not like getting engaged, but proposals where the man is on one knee with a bunch of roses and some doves, and the woman is wearing a white dress and her hair and nails are done up. Both parties have clearly agreed to get married. And given the outfit choice, there's been a discussion of when. So instead of spending hundreds of dollars on flowers and a photographer for a fake planned surprise, just call yourselves engaged and get on with it. Story 29. The pineapple on pizza debate is boring, asinine, and a waste of conversation. 1/5 of the posts below are about it. People bring it up like they are being funny or interesting, but it just shows me you do not have any actually interesting, unpopular opinions to stand behind. Story 30. Abolish the death penalty. Rework the system to rehabilitate people better and have fewer people in prison. Give people decent and better conditions in prison. Put those truly dangerous, such as murderers and rapists, behind bars forever and isolate pedophiles from one another instead of having them in the same prisons. Story 31. Once you hit 68, your voting rights are removed. No one over the age of 68 can run for office either. Laws are introduced to ensure you are not adversely affected by politicians, such as pensions. If your wealth reaches $1 billion, you are immediately taxed 100% on everything after. That includes purchases that hold your wealth, such as stocks, land, or capital. Story 32. In my opinion, 22 weeks was too much as a limit for abortion. In many cases, by week 5. So by week 10 to 15, you should be able to arrange if it's legal in your state, of course. 22 weeks or longer could be for cases when the health of the mother is in danger. Sex education should be mandatory. So many girls have no idea how not to get pregnant.